I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker. Dave Cunningham has 42 years of experience in the field of IT systems management. He started his career as an aerospace engineer with Rockwell International, working on guidance, navigation, and control systems for the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station. In 1992, he founded Dempsey Bluevar, an IBM premier business partner and managed service provider specializing in systems management. He sold the firm in 2012 and joined Alvaka as its business technology officer, where he serves today. And he is joined tonight by his associate, Dave White, over here, who will also co-present with him. So with that, I'll turn the podium over to Dave. Well, please welcome him.
So the challenge we have in these presentations is we have, two kinds of audiences. We have the executive audience, and if you give them a technical presentation, their eyes glaze over. If you have a technical audience, you give them the executive level, their eyes glaze over. So what we thought we would do, given that we had kind of a mixed audience, is we would start off. I'll start off with the executive level presentation, and then stack it on top, and then Dave will give the more technical part of the presentation. So everybody's eyes will glaze over. So our role in the market is we provide ransomware restoration services. That's what we do. So we'll be called in when there is an attack, and we're part of the team that restores this, the company back to operations. And the one thing that people don't understand, we all have heard ransomware, it's in the news, but unless you've been through a restoration, you have no idea of how chaotic and stressful and time-consuming that a ransomware attack is until you've actually been through it. We just think it's some data got encrypted and we've got to decrypt the data. So by way of, I'll give this example of how to illustrate how chaotic these situations are. So early on, I've been in this role for about 5 years, and early on, I learned a trick. The trick was I would like to know, because I come into an organization for the first time, I don't know anything about them, I don't know, how well managed the IT is, if it's, chaotic or not. So I always want to know, what are we getting into in this client? So I came up with a trick, which is you send the engineer down to the computer room with a camera, and you say, give me a picture of the computer room, because I want to know, are we dealing with this or this? And right, because if it's disorganized physically, it's going to be disorganized logically, right? So I kind of came up with that, because if it's more, there's going to be more work in a more chaotic environment. So anyway, so I'm in a case, and we had an engineer that went on premise, and it's like, are you there? I'm calling him up. He says, yeah, it's a madhouse over here. It's just crazy. I said, well, can you please, can you send me that picture? I need the picture. And he's like, all right, you got to be kidding me. I am just, the place is on fire here. You want me to go and send you a picture? I said, no, really, humor me. It'd be great. I need to see a picture of the computer room. He's like, all right, fine. All right, I will give you a picture of your computer. I will stop what I'm doing. I will go down to the computer room, stand by. I will give you your stupid picture. So anyway, so about 5 minutes later, I get a text on the phone that says, check email, exclamation point. So I check email. So he sent a thing that says, picture of computer room attached. And this was the picture that he sent me. And so I go, very funny, and he says, no, actually, look down in the bottom of there. You can see there's a ProLiant server sitting down there in the bottom. And he says, oh, I'm going to send you another picture. Here's a picture of our war room that I just walked out of that we set up, to take your picture. So here's a picture of the war room. So anyway, this is just to give you an idea of how chaotic and crazy that a ransomware restoration is. So first of all, let's talk about restoration times. Industry standard. If you, let's say somebody gets hit, they cannot recover from their backups, they're going to have to negotiate and purchase a key from the threat actor, which is, the worst situation. How long does it take before they're back in business? On average, It's 19 days. So this is with people working around the clock as hard as they can. It turns out that the decryption work stream is pretty time consuming. So if they can recover, well, it's like, okay, we've got good backups. They actually survived the attack. We're going to recover from our backups. It's still 12 days. And because this is not just a matter of, you restore your backups in your backup business. These are very, very destructive attacks. Of course, if you're not attacked and you prevent the attack, then that's a very fast restoration. So here's what we are projecting for 2025 based on 2024 and previous years. First of all, the attacks are continuing. There's no, why is this? And I came up with the idea there are no market pressures that tend to reduce ransomware attacks. Just everybody benefits except for the victim company. The insurance carriers, the service providers, regulators. Everybody seems to have some kind of a financial benefit for a ransomware attack, other than the criminal, right? The attacks are becoming more sophisticated. So it used to be, it's like, it's hard to stand on top of these threat actors. It's like, no, they were just doing the same attacks over and over, but now they have actually upped their game, and the attacks are quite a bit more sophisticated than they were 2 years ago. So the normal security measures are insufficient. Reattacks will continue to proliferate. Now, what this means is that if somebody's in the middle of a restoration, and let's say they have not paid the ransom, the threat actor, right? They're trying to not pay the ransom. Well, the bad guys are really motivated to continue to harass and reattack the environment. They got in the first time. That was the hard part. Getting back in the second time is pretty easy. So they'll either reattack during the case or 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later. So we're seeing this. A lot of our cases, fortunately, we're not involved in the first, but we'll come in and we start talking to the client on a case, and it turns out this was their second or third attack in 3 or 4 years. So these reattacks are proliferating. And if you are working for, in an organization and you get hit with a ransomware attack, I don't know what you're planning to do for the next 3 weeks, but your whole life is going to be ransomware. You're going to be conscripted into the team, and you're going to be doing ransomware restoration work. Why is this? Why is it so bad now? So this is not like it used to be 6 years ago. So it used to be back in 2019, the attacks were not so severe. So what you would have is you'd have a single user, they would get hit. Then their files would get encrypted. It was just a matter of recover from the backups or pay some small ransom, re-image the workstation, you're back in business, and the executive team might not even know. It was just something that was handled at the IT level, similar to like, I got a virus on my computer and I re-imaged wiped out the virus. So that's the way it used to be, and it wasn't so bad. That's not the way it is anymore. So what we have now is we have all these vulnerable computing environments, and we have just an array of criminal gangs that are financially motivated. They are going after these vulnerable environments, and the threat landscape has gotten to be much more severe. So anyway, this is the executive level. So how do you convey this idea to executives, in terms that they can understand? This doesn't really do the trick. So it's and with executives, you got to use pictures and not a lot of words. But how do you convey, how are we going to convey this to this situation? So this is the alternate version of the previous slide. So first of all, we have to visually represent the concept of you've got a computing environment. It's complex. It's changing all the time. It's vulnerable. It's like a living organism. That's what a computer network is. So and it's vulnerable, right? So anyway, I was searching around, for different images. This was the best representation of a vulnerable network that I can come up with. So this, from an executive's this is your network right now, especially if you're in an unregulated industry. If you're regulated, it's a different thing. And then the IT people will say, well, wait a minute. Our network, we've got security measures in place. It's hardened. We've got measures. We're not Bambi over here. We've got a hardened network. And I say, okay, all right, let me change it up. This is your network. So, right? So you've got a vulnerable network with some security measures in place. And the problem that we have is that the weaponry that's being deployed against these networks is getting bigger and bigger and bigger until we have the attack. All right, wait for it. And the last thing coming out of all of this is dollar signs. And the reason why I have dollar signs is these are extremely expensive, costly events. And you have the category of costs. They're extremely costly. So the first is you have all the direct recovery costs. So there could have been a ransom paid, 7 figures to a threat actor to get decryption keys. We've got all the various professionals that are in there. That would be, and we're one of those teams. We're under the data and systems recovery thing. We've got notification, credit monitoring, all of these professional services, plus the time of the staff and all that. But the problem that we have here is that this is only one category of cost. This is the smallest category of cost. The larger category of cost is the consequential damages, which is business interruption, brand reputational damage, which leads to customers going to competitors. We have all these plaintiffs' attorneys that are out there that are looking to sue these companies for the privacy breaches. You have fines. You imagine if here you are, you're doing business, one of your key suppliers gets hit. As a result, you are damaged. So now there's all that litigation that's going on. So it's just the consequential damages are much larger usually than the actual direct costs of the restoration. So the natural question is, well, okay, it's costly. I know how to deal with this. We'll get a cyber liability insurance policy. We can just mitigate this with insurance, right? So it seems like that would solve the problem. So how does insurance change the picture? And this is how it changes the picture. We still have a vulnerable network with protections, and now we got a big pile of money right next to it. So now it's a deep pocket. It's a more attractive target with an ability to pay a ransom. So same problem. So it's still devastating to the organization. Where I'm going with this is, insurance is not a magic pill. It does give financial resources to mitigate these costs, which are, typically the direct costs and some of the consequential damages like business interruption. Insurance carriers are very experienced with ransomware attacks, so they bring a very structured, plan. And so frankly, that's how we run our cases, whether they have insurance or not. We still use the same playbook that the insurance carriers have developed over the years. The problem with insurance is your mileage may vary depending on the carrier. The claims experience can be, just like with car insurance, can either be good or bad. They're not going to pay for any kind of betterment. It's only to restore your, to your pre-attack state. You may be limited to just using panel vendors that are on their panel. Maybe you don't want to use those vendors. You want to go with best of breed. And I think sometimes there's a conflict of interest because carriers are looking for the minimum cost to restore. Client victims, they're looking to get back up and running as fast as humanly possible. And so sometimes those are conflicts. So anyway, the moral of the story is know your policy and understand it, its limitations and its conditions. So when we recover, we've got 3 main goals for recovery. This guides, all of our work, whether we're a recovery firm or a breach attorney. data forensics, we all have three goals. One is we got to get back in business as fast as possible.
All right.
Second goal is do it without getting reattacked. And the third is minimize the overall costs and risk to the business through the attack and going forward. So those are all the goals of recovery. And so there's a number of roles that are in every case, and I always like to say that insurance companies are famous because they're cheap, right? They want to do everything the cheapest way. And these are the roles that an insurance carrier will insist are engaged in a ransomware case, because this will minimize the cost. The first is, and arguably the most important, is breach counsel attorney. So a breach of data privacy attorney comes in, they run the case, they assert the attorney-client privilege, they provide the case leadership, and they limit the legal risk downstream, which is the biggest possible, the biggest potential cost. Second is a forensics investigator, because we need to know how the bad guys got in, what did they take, what did they steal, have they been affirmatively ejected from the network, and essentially their investigation informs breach counsel, and that informs the advice that the client is going to receive from a legal perspective. The third is the negotiator. So whether or everybody starts off and we don't want to pay criminals but unfortunately, sometimes that's the only way. The criminals came in, they destroy the backups. There's no other recovery. It's either pay the criminals, get back in business, or go out of business. So there's always a negotiation with a threat actor. And even if clients are going to, they know they can recover from backups, they have no intention of paying the criminals, you still engage in a negotiation with the bad guys, because it forestalls if they think they're getting paid, then they're less motivated to harass and reattack in the middle of it. We're getting information, intelligence, they can then be fed up to breach counsel. So in all cases, you still have a negotiator that is communicating with these threat actors. And they're amazing in what they can do. They already know, the various groups. They know kind of what their playbook is. They know typically what kind of discounts can they negotiate. And, we're looking at a minimum of a 50% haircut or bigger. So somebody starts off with a $2 million ransom demand, and we're negotiating down to below $1 million is the target. So, and then the green lane, that's the lane that Dave and I live in. First is containment. So I was talking about, we don't want to get reattacked. So there's a lot of work to go into an environment that's been attacked and essentially do a crash security program to just implement security measures as fast as we can, eject the bad guys, and secure this against a reattack. This is super important. In parallel, we're doing the restoration work. So to restore these data and systems. And both of these have to go in parallel. And of course, if you're a manufacturer or they're focused on getting back in business because they're not shipping product. But if you restore before you contain, then it's a reattack in the waiting. The next thing is that there's a notification. You get these notifications that such and such company, you've been breached. It's in the interest of a company to narrow the scope of their notifications. They don't want to just go and notify the whole world that they've been attacked. We only want to notify those people that we are legally required to do, because the larger the notification scope, the greater the chance of a class action lawsuit. And no sense notifying somebody that their data was exfiltrated, compromised, if it wasn't. So there's a data mining effort, which is a narrowing of that scope to understand exactly, okay, we've got a healthcare system, they've seen 2 million patients in the last number of years. We don't want to notify 2 million people, because it may turn out that only 13,000 of them had medical records that were actually stolen. So let's narrow the notification down to those people that were directly impacted. You narrow that down, then the fines are less, the chance of a class action is less, the notifications and all the mail that goes out. The free credit monitoring is less. So this is the data. We don't do this. We only do the things in the green, but data mining is a big part of it. And then the notification services. We have to notify affected parties by snail mail and manage to make sure that people have been properly notified. So these are the roles. These are the roles in pretty much every case. So what are the trends we're seeing in 2024, 25? These are the trends. Double extortion is now a standard tactic. So double extortion means that bad guys get in before they encrypt the data. They are going to exfiltrate as much data as they can. They're going to steal as much data and threaten to release it. That's one part of the ransom. So we see cases where there was no encryption at all. It was just data exfiltration. And then the second part of the extortion is the encrypting the data and then demanding a ransom to fund a decryption key or decryption tools. Second thing is we are seeing EDR, so endpoint detection response software. People here are familiar with CrowdStrike Falcon, Sentinel-1. I don't know for the IT infrastructure folks. This is software that is loaded on the workstations and the servers that will detect an attack and block an attack. It's called EDR software. Turns out bad guys have figured out how to evade EDR software. It used to be considered sufficient to have EDR in place. And so 80% of the attacks that we're seeing in last year, the threat actors have figured out technical methods to evade the EDR, disable it, and go around it. So recommendation is you must have XDR, extended detection and response. The ability to see and monitor the whole environment, cloud services, the network, and the host. So ASM is attack surface management. That's a new, kind of a new category of security software. Next thing, if people here familiar with, if you manage IT, there's a backup software called Veeam. Does that ring a bell with folks? So we call Veeam is the threat actor's backup system of choice. It's very easily compromised. And we're seeing that when folks have Veeam, it is routinely destroyed. So it can be configured so it is immutable, meaning it's impossible to destroy, but most organizations don't implement the immutability. And then we see SOC providers, these security monitoring services, where they'll detect a an attack, but they don't block it because the idea is, hey, we're working around the clock. We should block these attacks, but we're seeing these services where they detected the attack, but they didn't block it. So we're seeing this trend more and more. And part of it is the threat actors themselves. And then just overall creativity, aggressiveness of these guys is amazing. Lots of stories, not safe for work, and in the way that they're harassing these people. So I'm going to, so we're doing good on time. I'll just very quickly just go through. People say, okay, so what do we do if there is an attack? What are the first steps? What do we do? What do we not do? So this is the first hour. So what we're suggesting to folks is they get hit, they disconnect from the internet. It's like, well, we're not going to be able to work. It's like, dude, you're not going to work for the next 12 days. So go ahead. Yeah. Power off the network switches. This prevents the systems from communicating and cross-infecting each other. The backup system is go ahead and isolate and get that backup system. We want to make sure that we preserve it. Write, protect, backup media. Get the ransom note. This is the commercial part, as call us, but we should have taken that out. Anyway, and people say, well, should I just power off everything? And the answer is no. You leave systems up and running. We don't want to corrupt data. The damage is done, and we want to be able to preserve artifacts out of RAM if we can. And so the recommendation is power off the systems. The other thing is don't attempt to, it's like I'm going to run Malwarebytes and I'm going to go clean all this mess up. And that is not a good idea. In fact, if you damage the encrypted data, it may not be recoverable. So, so any work that you do to try to clean up, and the other is to reach out to the bad guys, call them up, and give them a piece of your mind. That's not going to work. So, that's the first hour. Next actions, I would say, I should have on here. Open an insurance claim if you've got it. You're going to engage. We say the first people to engage are the breach counsel attorneys, because they'll bring all of the work under the attorney-client privilege. You engage forensics. We talk about how we advise people don't use your corporate email for communications about the case. The other thing you can always tell all employees is, look, if you access your banking, personal banking from work, well, your credentials are cached in the browsers. Those can be scraped by the bad guys, so it's a good idea to go ahead and change your banking passwords, set up two-factor authentication. Next, I say, do not render, I'm going to read my slides here because I don't have this. Don't render legal advice. There's a lot of legal questions. Everybody's got their theories, and it's like, leave that to the attorneys to answer those questions. I would say another thing is people, trying to be transparent. It's like, okay, we got to let our customers, we want to be transparent about that. This is one of those situations where it's kind of mum's the word. You don't want to say that ransomware. You don't want to say the word breach. Basically, hey, we've had some kind of a systems issue. We're working on it right now. And we'll let you know when we're back up and running. Say that. Another thing that people, a lot of IT departments do is they will, it's like, oh my God, we got to clean up this mess. That means we're going to go and re-image 500 workstations. Bad idea, right? You destroy all the work product, you destroy evidence, artifacts, and it's just a whole lot of work. We want to avoid doing a wholesale re-imaging of all the workstations. And then, the next 24 hours, you've got the firms engaged. They're setting up a recovery plan. Where the biggest question that we have is, are these backups viable? Can we recover from these backups? So understanding that is huge. Another thing is taking just, preserving firewall logs so that they don't roll off the edge of the earth. Again, do not re-image the systems. And then don't prioritize the recovery over the containment. People are just like, man, we got to get back. People say, well, we got to be back in business on Monday. Tell me, can we be back in business on Monday? And my answer is absolutely. I can't tell you which Monday it's going to be, but you are going to be back on Monday. So don't prioritize recovery over containment. I mentioned questionable decryption firms. There's some companies you can go out on the internet. One of them is called, there's a couple of companies. One of them is called Monster Cloud. Another one is Proven Data. And they say, well, don't pay a ransom. We will decrypt your data. We've got super, quantum computing and proprietary methods, and we're going to brute force decrypt your data for you, and which we can't do. And it just turns out they just reach out to the threat actor, purchase the decryption keys, use those to decrypt data. So, and so we've been in a lot of situations where we come in, the client's already engaged Monster Cloud, and the first thing the breach counsel is like, all right, first thing is we got to get those guys out, and because a lot of insurance carriers will not fund payments to these types of firms. All right, blunder management. This is a new discipline. We should have a framework, for blunder management. There are three major blunders that folks make that are, I should have a graphic of a foot being shot. So just put this in. So here are the three blunders that we want to avoid. First is assuming that the backups are viable, so therefore we can delete. We don't have enough space on our systems, so we're going to delete all this encrypted data, and so we can recover the backups. Then they do that, and then come to find out the backups were not viable, and so they're not able to recover. And so that's that's a bad situation because now you don't even have the ability to pay the ransom and decrypt the data. So that's blunder number one. Blunder number two is the inverse of this. Assuming that the backups are not viable, it's like, oh man, we got to pay these guys now because we got to get busy doing this. And so they fund the ransom payment in a hurry, so they can't really negotiate it down, only to find out after they pay the ransom that, oh, we could have recovered from our backups. We found some backups that we're able to recover from. And so they do not give refunds, and that the TAs, they're not going to issue a refund because you didn't need the key. So, and the third blunder, and this is the one that we actually see the most, which is restoring without containing. You know, we get everything back up and running and move heaven and earth, and that was 2 weeks, and they come back in on Monday, everything's re-encrypted. Bad day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the mic over to, that was the executive version, non-technical, of the presentation. And what I'd like to do is introduce Dave White. I had some slides on how do we not have this happen, but he also has some similar slides. So I'm going to turn it over and introduce Dave White.
All right, awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Dave, just like my coworker Dave. I've had an interesting road to get to where I'm at today, which is working side by side with this guy, which is really fun. In the ransomware recovery arena, my forte is in digital forensics and incident response. I spent about 21 years doing that type of work. I came from a 30-year law enforcement career. Spent half the time doing digital forensics, the first half of my career doing all the fun things that a beach city police officer might have the opportunity to do, like riding quads on the beach, mountain bikes, helicopter observer, police motorcycles, all the fun things. Then I smacked myself upside my head and I said, well, I got to get working on career number 2, and that's going to be digital forensics. So I did that. I was part of an FBI computer forensics lab for about 8.5 years, and learned a lot during that time, and had an opportunity to work a lot of cases over the course of that time frame, probably thousands of cases, and a lot of hands-on digital forensics work. So very fun stuff. Anyway, so there's a little bit about me. What I wanted to do is kind of get in the helicopter and go from 500 feet down to kind of nap of the earth, take you into, kind of double click into some of the details of this stuff, and like the anatomy of a ransomware attack and kind of how they occur. All right. So a typical ransomware attack will kind of start out in a variety of different ways, one of which is a phishing attack. So threat actors will blast out an email to a company of, say, 50,000 employees. 5,000 of those humans will click on the nefarious link, which will open up the fake Microsoft's credential sign-in page, and the next thing you know, the threat actors have harnessed usernames and passwords, credential harvest those, and they leverage those for access to these various networks and such. So once the ransomware gang has access to a network, they may sell that access to other ransomware gangs, who may then go into step 2, step 3 of the attack chain. And the ultimate goal, as Dave mentioned earlier, is to get into the network and exfil what the threat actors feel is sensitive data or valuable data that they can use for the ransom, the double extortion of, hey, we're going to post your data on said nefarious website on the dark web if you don't pay us X number of dollars. So that's kind of the ransom number 1. The second ransom is when they go and they encrypt the files and then demand a ransom for the decryptor or the key to decrypt those files. So it's a double extortion tactic that's very prevalent in this day and age. The destroying of the backups, as we see here, Does this have a laser? Yeah. Destroying of the backups over here is kind of like, priority number one for the threat actors. So having, as Dave mentioned, an immutable backup or a backup that is severed from the general network, or maybe stored in a cloud repository that's not accessible, at various times, is kind of the best course of action for saving your data or your backups. But generally speaking, we don't see that very often. We are dealing with people where they don't have immutable backups, and those backups were compromised during the attack and nuked. So, but Dave mentioned it earlier. Some of the goals of these attacks are for financial gain. There might be political motivation. It could be a brand reputation attack. There's a whole variety of motivations. However, most all of those are for financial gain. This is you may, and can you hear me in the back? Okay, perfect. So what I want to do is kind of double click into these various ransomware gangs and what their modus operandi are. How do they operate? What sectors do they attack? What are their attack methods, and so forth. So the first one that I want to look at is one called Black Basta ransomware. And for those in the back of the room, maybe hard to see this timeline here. However, this basically is showing how many minutes it takes for an attacker to gain initial access into an environment, and then all the way through, executing the ransomware, encryption in a client network. And this particular example, you basically start the stopwatch at the threat actor clicking send on the phishing attack email going out to the said corporation. Within 30 minutes after that email is sent out, the initial access into that environment has occurred by this ransomware gang. And then while they're in that network, they're conducting reconnaissance. They're looking for the very critical data that they can exfil or steal, so that they can hold that ransom to the victim company. They have to, the threat actors, once they're inside, they have to escalate their privilege access or become admin at some way, in some way, shape, or form, so that they can then traverse the network and look for these these nuggets of valuable data. So we're talking 90 minutes has elapsed, and the threat actor group has already gained access. They've already conducted their reconnaissance, and they're elevating their privilege into becoming system admins, so that they can turn things off like EDR and XDR and such like that. And then within 8 hours, in this particular example, the data exfiltration started. So the threat actor group, Black Basta, was starting to exfil data from that client environment. And then 9 hours, 20 minutes has elapsed, and this is when we start seeing account modifications occurring. So maybe new accounts were created, so they're passing those new admin accounts around to their, to their ransomware gang, who are tasked with doing other nefarious activities within this environment, and so forth and so on. 11 hours, 30 minutes elapsed, and the ransomware prep has now started. So they're getting ready to deploy. They're staging the ransomware programs and such, and then they're going to kick that off as a final execution, and that's the ransomware deployment. So that occurred at 13 hours, 35 minutes. So less than 14 hours, this group has been able to send a phishing email out, get into the environment, escalate their privileges, get admin access, go find the stuff they want to steal it, and then elevate, and then execute or detonate the ransomware for the double extortion of requesting a ransom demand for the key to unlock the now encrypted data, as Dave was mentioning, which is what we do all day long. We don't encrypt data all day long. We decrypt data all day long. So this group operates as what's called a ransomware as a service group. So they offer this service to other threat actor groups. Whatever component of this, whatever step of this stage that the other threat actor groups might want to utilize, they'll provide that sort of access. If it's initial access to a particular company, if it's admin access, what have you, if it's a kit to detonate evil ransomware, they can provide that kit as well. So this is just one example. Case study, Black Basta ransomware group. What I did was I took a few kind of case studies, and I'll kind of hurry through these in the interest of time. But I thought it was valuable for the group to kind of have an understanding of how these groups operate. This group called Medusa, this incident kind of popped in January. And this Medusa ransomware group, just in January, was responsible for over 40 different ransomware attacks. And since their existence, they've claimed nearly 400 victims, and they've popped up kind of in 2023. And what's interesting about this group is they in this particular case that's up on the screen here, they demanded ransom, up into the $15 million range from healthcare providers. So they are specifically targeting healthcare, financial services, manufacturing groups, or manufacturing companies, as well as education, government, critical infrastructure. So these are the target sectors that Medusa is going after. This particular group leverages Microsoft Exchange Server. So what is an Exchange Server? That handles your email traffic, right? So they're leveraging, they're going in, they're finding vulnerabilities within Exchange Server, then they're leveraging those vulnerabilities, and then they're doing things like business email compromise, they're sending out phishing email attacks, and that sort of thing. They leverage various attack methods, as I mentioned earlier, phishing, but zero-day vulnerabilities. So what is a zero-day vulnerability? It's an unknown unknown. It's a vulnerability we haven't seen in the wild yet, hence the word zero-day. But it's, it can potentially be undetected by EDR and XDR protection tools because it hasn't been seen in the wild yet. And then they leverage a technique called remote desktop protocol, or RDP, brute force attacking, which is basically threat actors are knocking on the doors of all of these victim companies to see what ports are open, to see what they can see, what the threat actors can see from the outside looking in. And if they find a hole, like remote desktop is open on, several systems within that environment, then that is their ingress point into the network, and then they can propagate and move laterally through the network and do their, carry on their nefarious activities. This incident occurred in February of 2025. There's a company in Virginia that houses 12 different companies. It's kind of a newspaper conglomerate. And this attack occurred by the Russian-linked group called Quinlan. They are another group that was kind of taken down by three-letter agencies called Conti ransomware group. Basically turned into multiple other threat actor groups, and one of which is Quinlan. And these guys, again, ransomware as a service group, and they exploit phishing attacks, zero-day vulnerabilities, and the like. They're also a double extortion. That's kind of their MO. And they also target healthcare, manufacturing, finance, and energy. This particular attacker group stole, a bunch of data, 350 gigabytes of data files, and and they were, very successful in this attack that took down all of these different companies that are sub companies under the parent company. In March, there was a Health Corp's healthcare network attack, and the interesting one about this was conducted by a ransomware group called Hades, and again, another Conti spinoff. And I don't know how these guys come up with these names. Hades, the Greek god of the underworld, so I don't know if they have like a threat actor boardroom and everybody kind of raises their hand and says, are there any objections here? No, they're not, like Dan does. Really, really fast, and they say it's Hades. That's what we're going to call it. And I don't know how they come up with these names, but that's what they do. But this one was interesting because, like Dave mentioned, he gave 3 scenarios, and the scenario that's really good is we can recover, clients from their backups. So the initial demand on this one was $50 million. It was negotiated not down to $25 million, but down to $12 million, which was, wow, that's a really great negotiation. For a threat actor negotiation in a ransomware attack, and they didn't have to pay it because they were able to recover from their backups. So it's a wonderful negotiation, and it cost them zero as far as the negotiation for the decryptor, because they just leveraged their backups. Again, we're seeing a common theme here. Hades is kind of focused on healthcare, manufacturing, and energy, government, and financial services. This is kind of what a real-life ransomware note looks like. And this is a really bad day when you come in on Monday and you see this, and you know that you may be able to recover in some other Monday down the road. You just don't know which Monday. But this is kind of the Acura ransomware. Ransomware note. And I just kind of reiterate what Dave said earlier, 19 days, if you can recover from backups, 19 days if you can't recover from backups, 12 days if you can, and we don't have to worry about it, 0 days if you don't get attacked, right? And what we're seeing is a rise, and this is lessons learned, so this is really nice of the Acura ransomware group to let you know how they got into your network, and provide you with all of the, it's probably very difficult to read this in the back, but provide you with all the cybersecurity 101 things that you should be doing as you're securing your network. Remember the Bambi helmet, and that is update all your software. Things like use antivirus, install multi-factor, everywhere you can. So these are all like cybersecurity 101 things that any one of these things on the list could be a way by which the ransomware groups are able to access, a client's network. This is we call this a punch list. On the right side, it's our data and systems recovery kind of list of operations that we go through and very methodically secure clients' networks from kind of from A to Z. So when we leave an environment and we've stood that back up and we've hardened that environment, it's much less susceptible to an attack than when we first walked in to the train wreck on day one. We talked about recovery, ransomware recovery timelines, and these are some mitigation points. So Dave touched on a few of these earlier, and that's the advanced threat detection or the endpoint detection and response, data encryption at rest and in motion, in transit. That's important. Regular backups, and more importantly than regular backups and immutability, like test and validate those. Make sure they work, right? So you don't have the scenario that he mentioned earlier, and that is, we're good, we're going to recover from our backups, and you're really not good because the backups don't work because you didn't test them and validate them. Multi-factor authentication. This is probably one of the most effective measures to blocking unauthorized access for threat actors. They're getting really crafty with being able to intercept multi-factor authentication, but it still remains, in my opinion, as one of the most beneficial. If you're going to do one thing in a network to kind of uplift your cybersecurity posture, MFA everywhere, or 2FA, multi-factor, two-factor, whatever you want to call it, a second factor of authentication is probably one of the very best things that you can do. And of course, network segmentation and access controls. So if a threat actor is able to, infiltrate your network, they can't, go everywhere because your network's segmented. If it's flat and everything's attached to a single network segment, they basically have keys to the kingdom, right? Once they get an admin account. And it's not very hard to get an admin account. Software updates and patch management. So Dave mentioned at Alvaka, we have a net secure side of the house. That's the 911, hairs on fire, ransomware, recovery side of the house. But fundamentally, and Dan mentioned on Dave's intro, Alvaka is a 43-year-old company. And they've been in the business of doing patch management, software updates and patch management, as well as disaster recovery and backups for decades. And that's probably one of the most important things that we see across our entire client base is that everything's out of date. Operating systems, clients are rocking, server 2003, and last time I checked, it's we're way into the century. So you've got to get rid of those deprecated, outdated operating systems, bring your network up to, to today's day and age, and then patch and update that stuff. I mean, I see all the iPhones out, if you don't have 18.3.1, like, come on, let's go. You got to update that stuff. There's a reason why Apple pushes those updates out. And if you have an Android device, like I said, I see a lot of Apples out there. And then employee training and awareness. I put that up there. Yeah, we hear about it. It's a, kind of a, catchy thing. Everybody's got to get trained. Don't click. Well, humans are just going to click. It is what it is. So rather than focusing on training all 50,000 employees not to click on a phishing link, how about we train, as Dave would mention, the captain of the ship on how iceberg recognition rather than all the passengers, right? Like the guy that's driving the ship needs to know how to avoid the iceberg. So I think it's the executives, the board of directors, the C-level that are the kind of the head of the entire department of cybersecurity or IT infrastructure at organizations. It's imperative that they are fully immersed in securing their networks and investing in proactive measures to uplift their cybersecurity posture. And to be quite honest, employing a multi-layered secured layer approach to their cybersecurity. These are just some, this is just a kind of a quick slide on how threat actors are getting in. They're leveraging vulnerabilities. Hardware and software, firmware updates. All these different vulnerabilities allow ingress access to threat actors by, and RDP is right up there at the top, remote desktop protocol. We see it on every case. And this is just an example of some vulnerabilities or CVEs, and they come out every single day. I think in 2025 there's going to be about 45,000 vulnerabilities that are going to, kind of emerge or at least be identified. God knows how many are unidentified vulnerabilities, but these are all the ransomware groups leveraging those vulnerabilities to gain access into client environments. From the, and apologize for folks in the back, it's just like a white screen with like cat eyes on here, so you're like, yeah, whatever, dude. But the top one is talking about a vulnerability in the Microsoft Exchange server, which is the email server, highly vulnerable. The second one down is talking about Fortinet, so your FortiGates, your edge devices, your firewalls and such. There's vulnerabilities in those identified all day long. And if you're not patching and updating those, then those are basically just like leaving your front door open and hoping that, bad guys don't come in and steal your stuff. And then the bottom one here is talking about privilege escalation with regard to Windows operating systems. We've got Cisco firepower, so firewall, edge devices needing updates. And these exploits, like for instance on the one over here, Black Cat and Dark Side leverage these vulnerabilities to get into client networks. And that is like the way they got into the client network and then wreaked havoc within the client environment, up to and including the ransomware attack and double extortion and all that stuff. And then this one's talking about a manage engine vulnerability, which there's just tons of vulnerabilities. 2025 cybersecurity threat stats. There's a stat for the CVEs, the critical vulnerabilities. There's going to be 46,000 of those identified this year. So that's 45,000 reasons why you need to secure your network. That's very important. The FBI works a lot of BEC or business email compromise cases. That's kind of a primary focus of their cyber squad because there's just a boatload of them that come in every year. In 2023, I know, that's what I said. 2025 we're in right now, but 2024 stats have yet to be released. It's coming to a theater near you soon. But there was total losses of $55.5 billion just out of business email compromise. Remember those phishing email examples I gave you? Remember the Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities to allow threat actors to get into environments and take over the email system? They're launching business email compromise. That is, threat actor gets in via phishing attack or a vulnerability in the the network or Exchange server, whatever. They get in, they pretend to be the company, and they send out to their vendors, hey, we just got, we changed our bank account from, I don't know, fill in the blank, Bank of America to Wells Fargo. Here's our new, account information. Please remit further payments to us in this account, which is, threat actor controlled, and business email compromise happens. And so hundreds of millions of dollars go, billions, $55.5 billion goes to threat actors in that manner. And I venture to guess, because I've watched this stat, I've been involved in these cases. It's just, it just continued to rise. And I'm going to go out on a limb. You heard it here first, and I'm going to say that the 2024 stats, when they pop, will be much higher than $55.5 billion. And what are the things we worry about today? AI, right? Everybody's talking about AI, how to leverage it for good. Anything that's leveraged for good is going to be leveraged for bad and evil. So AI-driven phishing attacks, you're starting to see better, well-crafted phishing attacks that are leveraging misspellings, no more weird sentence structures and such, because people that are doing these attacks are not from the U.S., right? And so these phishing, some of the phishing emails are just like, really, seriously, spam, block, right? But some of them are like, could be legit. Like, I would fall for this, right? And that's because they're starting to leverage AI. So that's kind of a scary thing. They're talking about cybercrime damages are going to reach, $10.5 trillion globally in 2025. That's really a scary statistic. And these are just some tips and takeaways. For the students in the room, these are some resources for you where you can grab some cybersecurity certifications free of charge. A lot of them are free. And they're really good courses. I personally know the guy that wrote the Google cybersecurity certificate. I worked with him in a past life. And these Palo Alto cybersecurity courses are really good. SANS is kind of a industry standard for obtaining, digital forensics, incident response, cybersecurity certifications. And then this one up here is also good, and they've got a bunch of different free exams and such. And these are just your typical cybersecurity tips. don't attach your computers to unsecured, no passworded Wi-Fi's. So that's what I've got. Here's some contact information for you. This is perfect. This is all Dave's information.
Right.
Perfect.
What's the timeline when you are hit with the ransomware? And I guess like does it vary the timeline depending on who they attack?
In terms of the timeline from,
To pay the ransomware, like the clock starts ticking
Oh.
and you lose your data like that.
yeah, so there is a pressure tactic where they say you got to pay by a certain amount of time, or the clock is ticking down. If you don't pay by a certain amount, then we're going to delete your data. The short answer is we've never seen that threat be carried through with, because it's just a pressure tactic. At the end of the day, they want to get paid, and if they go a week after the deadline, they can negotiate a payment, then there's no, I would say, people should not, I mean, they may be under pressure to recover quickly just because they want to get their business back up, but not to meet any kind of an artificial deadline that a threat actor said. And a lot of them have that verbiage, as they're communicating. You only got 24 hours to get back to us. They're looking for a fast payment, a fast settlement, but that is not a threat that is, at least in 5 years, that I've seen actually followed through on.
I'm going to take advantage of having the microphone to ask my question, which is you indicate that it's pretty easy to get elevated privileges. How, if you just get credentials for some random users through a phishing attack, do you get admin access out of that?
Yeah. So their threat actors are leveraging a variety of different tools to conduct their credential harvesting, to conduct their privilege escalation tactics and such. So there's tools out there that allow them to gain elevated privileges. Also, they are leveraging tools to. They're also leveraging the IT infrastructure tools living on the LAN tools. So the LOL bins, the tools that are already in the systems installed within the client environment. So it's a variety of different tactics that they're leveraging.
In the first half of the presentation, in one of the do sections, there was a line item in there that talked about setting up email addresses. So my question is, what is the purpose and what's the intent and what kind of email addresses?
Yeah, that's good. So we call those burner email addresses because threat actors will compromise the email tenant, and they'll be able to, if they have done so, then they're reading the emails that are going around. So the idea is to set up, just go out and set up net new email addresses, say in Gmail, right? And we tell people not to use their personal email because if there's litigation down the road, we don't want your personal email box to be subject to discovery. So everybody that is on the recovery team, not for the whole company, but we've got several key people at the client that are engaging in conversations with the attorneys and talking about the case, and we want those communications to be out of band so that they're not being read by the bad guys.
Yeah, during the reconnaissance, as I mentioned before, the different vulnerabilities that threat actors leverage to gain access to the email tenant, the purpose for that is recon, right? So they're reading the emails and so forth. They're digging through those emails. They're finding the victim company's cyber insurance policy, for instance. And lo and behold, it's a $15 million cyber insurance liability policy. And it's like, well, the ransom amount is $15 million. That's ironic, right? So they gathered that intel as they were doing the recon because they gained access to the email tenant.
I thank you for the fascinating talk. And my question is, will these ransomware groups keep their promise? Do they actually deliver when you pay them ransom?
Why do they keep their promise?
Or how often? What's the percentage of them will keep their
Yeah,
promise?
I've done multiple, many ransomware negotiations, and it's very. My experience has been that they keep their promise, if you want to call it that, to provide the ransomware decryption keys or decryptor tool when the ransom is paid. It's a business model that these guys have had. So if you think about it, if basically the ransoms that were being paid yielded 0 decryptor tools, then nobody would pay the ransom because they just feel like they're going to throw the money out the window as they're driving down the
Reputation too.
They have a brand to preserve, right?
They do, right? They run it just like a business.
Yeah, I would say so. Dave's got more case experience than I have, but I've done about 300 cases. Fortunately, and knocking on wood, we have yet to get skunked in receiving a decrypting key or tools. And occasionally we run into, we just had a case this last week where there was difficulty in running the tools, because when you run these, it's not like you take a password and you enter it in and okay, we're back up in business. You actually have to go through this whole decryption process, and it's a quite a messy process. And we were running in this one case, they were able to decrypt smaller files, but the larger VMDKs we were getting hung up on. But fortunately, we have not yet gotten skunked. As to the promise not to exfiltrate data, that's less reliable. And there's some insurance carriers that will not fund the portion ransom for a promise not to release data, because that's hard. It's less tangible.
Yeah, and what I've found over the years is that the threat actors are really good at encrypting data, and the tools that they leverage are kind of turnkey and very easy to use, and highly automated. The decryption tools are a little clunky.
Yeah, not so much, right?
Yeah, and so it takes a bit of data massaging to be able to finesse, resurrect these files from the dead, so to speak, the encryption to decrypt them. Yeah.
I had 2 quick questions for you. The first is, are you starting to see any AI voice imitation phishing attacks at companies yet? I know it's been used for personal attacks, telling people that their kids have been kidnapped, that kind of stuff. But I'm wondering if that's happening at the corporate level yet. And then the second question was a more significant one, which is, what is your assessment of state actors attacking our infrastructure for the country, and how do you see the prognosis for us surviving that type of attacks as opposed to the corporate stuff?
And I'm trying to go back. What was the first question again?
I have not
Oh,
seen
the AI
voices.
voice. We've not seen that. What we have to, I'll answer the second question, then I'll come back to something we're seeing a lot more. I'll talk about email bombing.
Yeah, perfect.
So the prognosis, I think, is grim. We have not, but I think it's an active war. I think that our critical infrastructure is quite vulnerable, especially water districts. This is crazy because you attack a water district, you can poison the water, and it's like, what do we use to cool data centers? Water from water districts. So if you attack a water district, you can actually, it's like a kinetic attack on a data center. Very vulnerable. And there are challenges around securing this critical infrastructure. Fortunately, we are not seeing, at least in our world, we are not seeing these attacks yet. But I think that it is a vulnerability that we need to mitigate.
And I think there's a heightened, level of support for providing more security around, critical infrastructure. You see the federal government starting to step in and building out different programs and such. There's various mandates that are coming down. And then if you walk the halls of RSA, a very popular cybersecurity conference, you see a lot of companies that are focused on this particular space. So I think in that, seeing those activities occur, that's encouraging to me. the problem with a lot of the critical infrastructure is, and I mentioned it earlier in the talk, and that is deprecated operating systems. A lot of these systems are really old. Windows 7, Windows XP in some cases. Like, it's really kind of like eye-opening, shocking. So being able to secure some of these things, there's different technologies now that are being deployed around securing the data flow within these critical infrastructure systems. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, I did want to add, you were asking if are we seeing voice AI? We're not seeing that. But there is a new technique. This is literally just a couple of months old. We've seen it very successfully used, and I want to make you guys aware of it because you can, you'll be able to see the symptoms or the signature of this type of attack. It's called email bombing. It's not phishing emails, but it's email bombing. So what the bad guys do is they will get for an organization, they'll get a bunch of email addresses for people in the company. These are in the public domain. It's really easy to get. And what they'll do is they'll take these email addresses and then they will subscribe all these users to receive newsletters and advertisements and all sorts of bulk commercial mail. So you come in on Monday and you're looking at your inbox and there's 1,000, your inbox is clogged with a bunch of emails. Then you go to your spam filter. It's like, that's totally clogged. People can't even use their email. And then the bad guys call up and they impersonate the IT department and say, hey, I'm calling from the IT department. We're trying to clean up this email problem. I need access to your desktop, right? And then what they do is they use the method that the IT department uses for remote access, like remote support through Microsoft. So the user's like, oh, this is how I receive support from the IT department, is through remote support, in Teams. And then they access the desktop, and then they're off to the races. There's two ways to mitigate that. One is the IT department can set a policy such that remote sessions cannot be initiated from outside the domain. That's the first way. And the second is, once they're in, they're generating all sorts of nefarious, malicious traffic on the network. That can be detected through this XDR technology and can be blocked. So, but I just say, if you come in and you see you have a whole bunch of junk mail in your inbox, wait for the call, right? So that's something to definitely reach out, say, hey, I got an unusually high amount of junk mail in my inbox. I think it may be a mail bombing campaign, and then the IT, can be aware of that.
I did want to add a comment.
Because I had this happen to me personally, they will do email bombing on your personal account as well. And the intent is to have you not detect that your bank has notified you that a change of address or a change of phone number or something has occurred on your account. And they use your email to verify. And when you get 1,000 junk emails, you just select all and delete everything and don't realize that somewhere in that 1,000 emails is one that was your second factor authentication that you missed because they did the email bombing on you. So it works both at the corporate and the personal level. Sorry.
Thank you for the talk. It was great. You mentioned insurance a number of times. Do you know, and I know this is dependent on the carrier, but general liability insurance for businesses, is that something that's stepping in and covering cyber incidents at all at this point? And the second question that I had was, you guys talked about how easy it is if the backup data is there. How do you know if that data is not corrupt? So they've implemented code that will actually go off once you try and restore the system.
So I would say the general liability typically excludes cyber liability coverage. I mean, policies are different. 95% of the time it doesn't cover. There's some umbrella policies that have a small cyber liability rider, but generally you have to have a separate cyber liability policy. It's actually relatively inexpensive compared to the rest of the insurance bill. That's first thing. In terms of the problem of, hey, we're backing up data, we don't want to recover it because it may be potentially compromised. It may have time bombs in it. So that's all in the course of restoring data, and then clearing that data, inspecting it, because we're going to assume that all data is suspect until it's been reviewed and scanned for malicious code.
I have a question about bad actors. If you have a bad actor that encrypts data, and then they have a partner bad actor who encrypts over that, is that a possibility? And if that's the case, then how do you
Yes.
identify the number of bad actors in your network
Oh, man.
to get them out?
Great
Well,
question.
Yeah, yeah. Double encryption, like layers of encryption, like lasagna, right? We do see that. We had a school district that was just like crazy. We were in there. We ejected the original threat actor, and in the investigation, we find that there are 6 other threat actors in the environment trying to get to the data first. So, but we do see the problem with the double encryption. And when I mentioned we haven't gotten skunked yet, but we've had some close calls, and we have the close calls around these double encryption events. And typically it's not 2 threat actors, it's a single threat actor that's run the wrong script or something like that. We've not had a situation where we're able to decrypt the first layer, now we get encrypted data as a result, and now we've got to negotiate with a second threat actor. We've not had that situation. We do see the situation where Akira attacks somebody, and then another bad guy comes along and impersonates Akira, says, "You got to pay me." So, and then Akira's like, "These guys are making me crazy." So, so we've had that where somebody tags or piggybacks on the original attack and says, "No, pay me. Don't pay those Akira guys." So,
But how do you identify that you actually got that person out, that bad actor out?
so
Indicator that is clear.
So the indicator is typically through, there's identified IOCs, indicators of compromise, that are in the environment. And so running EDR tools such as CrowdStrike Falcon is looking and detecting malicious code, malicious activity in the environment, because we don't want to reimage the world. We want to bring up this dirty network safely. And so you do that by using EDR software.
Yeah, and the EDR, XDR, now it's XDR technologies, they're employing AI and machine learning technologies now. So when I mentioned earlier about the not being able to identify 0-day threats, these technologies now can do that because they're not identifying a signature based, like a hash value of evil, an evil file. Whereas remember back in the day when we had, virus definition library updates and you had to go and update your library and all that, well, it was downloading all of the new known hash values of evil files, worms and malware and all this stuff. And so then your antivirus was able to detect if any of those files were on your systems because it had a whole library list of, hash values, unique identifiers for each file. Well, now the technology's not really identifying indicators of compromise, it's identifying indicators of behavior. So it's a behavior analysis that's going on with these softwares now, these XDR software technologies that are leveraging AI and machine learning to identify evil behavior activities, and it blocks behavior. So that way you can identify a 0-day threat, maybe not by hash value, or indicator of compromise, so to speak, but by indicator of behavior. Like, this is evil behavior, block it, and lo and behold, it's a new 0-day. The vulnerability that was blocked. Yeah.
Hi, great talk, by the way. Just a quick question. How effective is law enforcement in situations like this, and when or do you get them involved?
Why are you looking at me?
Law enforcement. So generally, what we are seeing most of the cases that it's a one-way street. They want to receive information about an attack, but they're not really much involved in helping out. Now, there's 2 exceptions. One is in a BEC, the Secret Service is very effective at clawing back money that's been fraudulently transferred from one bank to another. There's a lot of anti-money laundering measures in place in the banking system, It's really easy to transfer money from one bank to another. It's difficult to pull that money out of the bank. So Secret Service can claw that money back even months after a fraudulent transfer. That's one thing. The other thing we're seeing that the FBI will show up at somebody's door and says, hey, by the way, we've been monitoring systems and you have been compromised by this particular threat actor. Now, it's good when they show up before the attack because we've had them show up as like, you've been hit. It's like, yeah, we know. That was 2 weeks ago. But we have had situations where the FBI does show up and says, hey, you got a problem. And sure enough, they do an investigation and we got a problem and they actually prevent, head that off. So the FBI actually, in my opinion, has gotten better with that. So I was just, as a final thought, we've been talking about the risks and I don't want to seem like we're sowing fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? It seems kind of like so hopeless. But I will say this risk, even to this day, this is a risk that can be mitigated. It can be managed. And there are quite a few organizations out there that are targets. And I can say I'm pretty confident that these are, when I see how they're managing their security, and it's not necessarily super expensive, but when I see how they're managing their security, I can say for sure this organization is never going to be attacked. Successfully attacked. So I just wanted to give it just, some hope here is this is a risk that can be managed, and it is managed in a lot, financial institutions have to mitigate this risk by mandate, right? And you don't hear a lot of banks getting hit by ransomware attacks. It's not necessarily super expensive to mitigate the risk. It can be managed. And so I just wanted to give you the silver lining.
And shameless plug for Alvaka is that we not only do we handle, we call it right of boom. The boom is the bomb that you saw in Dave's presentation, the ransomware attack. Right of boom, we handle, after the attack, but we also do, pre-attack or left of boom. We go through the same methodology of securing an environment that we do in our ransomware recovery efforts pre-attack state, and that's it's a great exercise to go through for any company. If you have any questions about that, you can hit me up afterwards, and we'd be happy to help you along your cybersecurity journey.